Now, as much as we do enjoy doing the odd bit of speed leveling, we certainly, the pair of us on the PTRs and betas, we did like loads of characters and stuff like that. So we love that. But we absolutely, I mean, at least for me, it might be the same for you. I absolutely don't think that's how the game should be.
Almost certainly not. It's like all of the incentives are for you to not play the game correctly or to not enjoy the game. I think that's the way it ends up, especially after leveling multiple characters, where you're just going, oh, I will do the Azeroth autopilot route or like the quickest one I possibly can to get through this like segment, but then you don't get to experience any of it, which even comes down to like when you're running to a location, looking at like a beautiful vista like panned up beside you, because you're too busy going staring at the arrow or at the arrow in your head, going quest marker, go 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 go.
Yeah, it's that thing of actually giving players freedom, right? Because you give players a bunch of incentives, you give them freedom to just go at it, and yeah, it can result in, over time, the standard default gameplay behavior of your game is not really fun. Like, it's completely goals-oriented, and, based on guides and the speed leveling and stuff like that, but it's not necessarily a great experience, and it's almost certainly not capturing the experience that the developers actually intended to build. So it's a funny little situation, and right now we're talking about leveling. I think there's more to talk about there once you get on to the questing that happens in endgame. For leveling, to be honest with you, what I would do, this is not what I necessarily 100% do, but there's a thing in my head where I'm sort of thinking, right, because leveling to so many people is treated just as a pointless roadblock to doing a bunch of super gameplay oriented stuff, and that has a whole bunch of restrictions and things that it sort of imposes on the rest of the game, right? Like, leveling has generally got faster and faster and faster as times went on. The level of challenge that you face is, I don't want to say it's lower and lower and lower and lower, but maybe it is. It certainly is quite low from my sort of perspective of it generally. There's a bit of me that would wonder, we call it leveling, but in that question, it was phrased as questing. Would it be a better idea to just completely throw away the idea of getting our characters from the past expansion to the cap of the current expansion via leveling process that involves going around doing zones? Would it actually make sense to try to get away from that idea and basically just say, hey, here's the new expansion, progress your character, and then you're sort of at your endgame stage, and by the way, here's 5 Suramars, right? Just like actually sit there and be like, this isn't just a pass-through leveling zone that you then return to do some world quests. No, this is like its own place. So there's a bit of me that would think that for what modern World of Warcraft actually is in reality, that something like that would be better, because it would basically mean that the people who want to go ham and level super, super, super fast, well, they could just do whatever the hell they want. It wouldn't really affect them because leveling would be sort of reduced in the overall equation. But for the people who actually do want to be immersed in the fantasy universe that is Warcraft, they could maybe get a more tailored experience. So that's a lot of what goes through my head when you're on that topic of how to actually make an engaging like leveling sort of questing experience in World of Warcraft. It brings me back to my initial leveling up in BFA, where I basically got bored out of my skull because the change in how my character felt from End of Legion to BFA was so stark. But I then realized the only way for me to actually have gameplay fun and a modicum of challenge when I level that character up was to do mass pulls with Storm, Earth, and Fire. And, Touch of Karma and all of that stuff. And that was the way for me to actually squeeze a little bit more fun juice out of that leveling experience. But I feel like that sort of stuff existed in a more cerebral, in some ways, and just more default manner in the previous version of the game, where, I was just doing these mindless gigapulls, just sort of daring myself and then going ham on all of my character buttons, instead of a little bit more, slow, considered, sort of looking around the world. And that, of course, I think about us in the Harpy area, to the north of the Barrens on classic launch night, getting destroyed by those Harpies, where that was like real small, tiny stakes. But we were on this very simple journey for our characters that was meaningful. And that really worked. That was a bit where questing really worked. And then I think to other times where questing have worked, when Blizzard changed, I think it was for patch 7.3.5, and this was another one of those times where I was sitting there saying, look, this is great. I'm actually fighting these mobs for a tiny sliver more, of time. Because before that, it was absurd. You practically would look at a mob and it and all of its friends would fall over and die when you were leveling before 7.3.5. And I remember just sitting there being like, this is great. They're actually putting a bit more gameplay back in this thing. And just having so many people say, oh my god, Blizzard have nerfed leveling, they've made it slower, they've made it harder to kill mobs, they've made it easier to die, this is terrible. They're just doing this to pad out the experience so they can get more subscription money by making leveling longer. And I'm just sitting there bashing my skull off the desk being like, oh my god, they moved 1 or 2 inches towards the design of things being better, and this is the bullshit they were hit with. Which I think really is saying that there's so many different games in World of Warcraft, and Blizzard have ended up setting up a whole bunch of expectations. And because there's so many games in World of Warcraft and Blizzard kind of wants you to participate in all of them, it just leads to all those situations where you kind of feel like you're nagged into doing something you don't want to. Because for some people, leveling up a fresh character, and maybe in a world a bit more like Classic or TBC, where it's like slower and you can really die if you pull too many mobs, where you actually have to think about your gameplay when you're leveling. That's just a version of the game that, to the people who only care about the end game stuff, and are just there, the way they play WoW is pushing Mythic Plus keys forever, and that's just what they do. Well, to them, leveling up a character is just a boring thing that they don't want to do, in the same way that they, maybe don't want to go get Soul Ash and Torghast. Yeah. So it's a really tricky thing.
It's the difference between being goals-oriented and experience-oriented, I think. Because that is it was that very night I played a little bit of Classic, like just for like an hour doing one quest, and I actually felt the shift in my head as I was playing, because I logged and went, oh, I'll hit 20, I'll get cat form, nice, maybe I'll eventually hit 60, who knows. But just as I was like starting the quest, I was like, I felt annoyed that I had to go so slow, and that I had to think about where the actual like boss enemies I was looking for were. And then at some point it just went, no, this is fun, I'm just going to play this for a while now. And I could feel the switch from I'm going to get 20 to I'm playing the game. And I think it's like ultimately the player expectations on that front need to be deprogrammed down to the experience level again, but God knows how they'll get that accomplished.
I think that's really that is the struggle with World of Warcraft right now, where